Halo semua partisipan, selamat sore. Udah dengar semua ya kalian suara saya ya? Ya. Oke, sudah ya. Terima kasih teman-teman udah hadir di kesempatan kita kali ini untuk mengikuti webinar kita dengan Mr. Eric. SAT verbal. Nah, perkenalkan saya Ghazali, nanti akan ada pembicaranya itu Pak Ian dan Mr. Eric untuk menjelaskan introduction tentang SAT verbal. Nah, pada kesempatan kali ini saya sedikit mau menjelaskan rundown-nya. Jam 3.05.
Belum berangkat, kamu tinggal jalan dulu aja.
Oke. Baik, Ibu Isna, terima kasih.
Ya.
Ya, kita akan mulai jam 3 sampai jam 10. Di sini saya coba menjelaskan opening. Nanti akan ada opening dari Pak Ian. Jam 15.10 sampai 15.20. Pak Ian akan memberikan sedikit kuis. Tolong diperhatikan ketika nanti ada present dari Mr. Eric tentang introduction SAT. 15.20 sampai 15.50. Oke, serta 15.50 sampai dengan 16 itu ada sesi tanya jawab dan yang terakhir di sini ada closing untuk 5 menit. Oke, kita langsung mulai aja ke tata tertib webinar kita. Oke, yang pertama mohon mikrofon dinonaktifkan teman-teman agar tidak mengganggu pembicara yang lain selama sesi webinar berlangsung. Selama speaker nanti tidak menginstruksikan untuk meng-unmute speaker, mohon untuk speaker terus di mute. Dan video boleh dalam kondisi on, tapi dengan persyaratan peserta seminar berpenampilan sopan. Baik, sebelum kita mulai, ada sedikit video dari kami. Ya. Apakah sudah terlihat? Ya.
Sejak ikut kursus di Kaplan dan diajar sama teacher-teacher yang juga sangat sabar, ramah, dan mereka juga paham gimana caranya mengajarkan kritik dan JRI, saya jadi lebih pede gitu untuk mengerjakan soal-soal JRI.
Sangat membantu kami, para student, untuk bisa mencapai nilai tertinggi.
Dan mendapatkan tips-tips yang sangat membantu dari para pengajar untuk bisa menyelesaikan soal-soal di tes JRI dengan baik.
Dan saya melihat signifikansi kenaikan di mana hampir mendekati sempurna.
Para tutor yang luar biasa yang membentuk saya yang tadinya tidak mengerti what is GRE, what is TOEFL, tapi mereka bisa membuat saya menjadi the most improvement untuk 3 kategori, the most improvement TOEFL, the most improvement improvement GRE kuantitatif dan the most improvement GRE verbal.
Nah, itu dia teman-teman. Terima kasih. Sekarang saatnya sesi perkenalan. Kaplan itu apa? Dengan Pak Ian. Pak Ian?
Oke.
Baik.
Suara saya bisa didengar, Kak?
Bisa didengar, Pak.
Oke, thank you. Ya, oke, selamat sore semua peserta webinar mengenai Introducing SAT Verbal yang akan dibawakan oleh Erik. Tapi sebelum itu akan saya bantu untuk pengenalan mengenai apa sih Kaplan Edupac itu. Jadi pada kesempatan ini saya akan memberikan informasi mengenai Kaplan Edupac. Saya yakin bahwa sudah banyak ya yang mengetahui Kaplan Edupac itu apa, dan bagi yang belum, ini adalah kesempatan yang baik tentunya untuk mengetahui apa itu Kaplan Edupac. Dan jangan lupa nanti di akhir sesi kami akan berikan kuis. Jadi kalian bisa perebutkan, yaitu dengan menjawab pertanyaan dengan hadiah voucher senilai 1 juta. Nanti di akhir itu akan kita sampaikan untuk kalian menjawab pertanyaan. Oke, dan jangan lupa untuk peserta webinar yang berencana untuk ikut test preparation, jadi kita ada promo, jadi super promo test prep diskon 1 juta. Nanti kalian bisa scan barcode yang akan kami tampilkan. Oke, perkenalkan saya Ian dari Kaplan Edupac IA Sentral di Jalan Jenderal Sudirman, Kafling 48A. Oke. Nah, di sini kita lihat bahwa prep smarter score higher. Nah, itu kita perlu dalam rangka mempersiapkan persyaratan studi, kita harus benar-benar pintar ya dalam mempersiapkan, karena ini adalah saat-saat yang penting di mana menentukan apa bisa diterima di sekolah yang kita tuju. Jadi kita harus lebih baik dari waktu, kemudian maupun skor yang sangat bagus ya dibanding skor-skor dari peserta-peserta yang lain atau mereka yang ingin sekolah juga. Jadi agar bisa diterima di sekolah dalam negeri maupun di luar negeri sesuai dengan harapan kita tentunya. Oke, next slide Kak Jali. Ya, Kaplan dikenal sebagai the world leader in test preparation. Jadi Kaplan ini dikenal sebagai satu-satunya penyedia test preparation atau tes persiapan ujian terbesar di dunia. Nah, diantaranya adalah yang pertama bahwa Kaplan ini sudah cukup lama, lebih dari 80 tahun, telah memberikan jasa persiapan tes sebagai salah satu sekolah terbesar di dunia yang concern di persiapan ujian. Oke, jadi itu yang pertama. Jadi perlu diingat nanti pada sesi akhir bisa saja ini mungkin kisi-kisi yang akan kita keluarkan. Nah, yang kedua, Kaplan ini sudah tersebar lebih dari 240 cabang di dunia, tidak hanya di Indonesia, kita ada di Singapura, Aussie, UK, dan lain-lainnya, di mana terdapat 162 center di Amerika sendiri. Itu yang kedua. Dan yang ketiga, Kaplan ini sudah dengan pengalaman selama ini, Kaplan sudah membantu lebih dari 3 juta siswa dalam mempersiapkan diri menghadapi ujian untuk mencapai tujuan, baik itu ke perguruan tinggi maupun di karir. Nah, itulah 3 di mana Kaplan disebut sebagai the world leader in test preparation. Oke. Yang selanjutnya, Kak Jali, kenapa sih kita perlu belajar di Kaplan atau why ke Kaplan? Nah, Kaplan adalah satu-satunya sekolah persiapan ujian yang mempunyai website sendiri. Jadi seperti kita tahu, di situ tercantum bahwa www.captest.com. Jadi di mana di situ sudah mirip dengan tes resmi secara online dari US. Kita dapat ketahui bahwa tes sekarang kan sudah banyak sekali yang online ya, karena student juga perlu latihan skill strategi maupun time managementnya. Jadi tidak hanya mengikuti preparation dengan didampingi oleh native teacher, tetapi di rumah juga kita harus latihan karena untuk mendapatkan skor yang lebih maksimal. Jadi pilih lembaga yang sudah punya latihan mirip dengan aslinya, yaitu di Kaplan tentunya. Oke, itu yang pertama, itu kenapa di Kaplan. Nah, untuk yang kedua, kenapa kita di Kaplan? kita memiliki original material. Jadi kita sudah provide ya material sendiri, tentunya sudah melalui research and development ya, di mana ahli bahasa sudah dapat memberikan material yang update menyesuaikan dengan perkembangan. Oke, itu yang kedua. Dan yang ketiga, guru yang berkualifikasi tinggi. Jadi kita mempunyai atau memiliki highly qualified teacher, karena Kaplan memiliki teacher-teacher yang berpengalaman dalam mengajar, sehingga dipastikan setiap siswa mendapatkan teacher yang dapat membimbing untuk meningkatkan nilai atau skor dari persiapan preparation. Oke, itu tadi 3 kenapa kita harus di Kaplan. Nah, berikutnya adalah apa saja sih program yang ada di Kaplan? Mungkin teman-teman di sini sudah banyak yang tahu juga ya, baik itu untuk yang S1 maupun S2. Nah, di mana di Kaplan ini kita punya program GMAT, GRE untuk master, kemudian TOEFL IBT, IELTS, ada TOEFL ITP, ada SAT yang sekarang tentunya yang akan kita dengarkan dari Mr. Eric nanti, yaitu mengenai verbal ya, session mengenai verbal. Tapi tidak hanya preparation aja, di Kaplan kita juga ada program kalau misalnya kita butuh, saya butuh untuk bahasa Inggris. Nah, untuk pendalaman mengenai general English, kita pun ada. Kemudian untuk skill mengenai academic writing, untuk mereka yang profesional, orang kerja biasanya perlu program business English, kemudian ada juga program English for academic purpose, conversation skill, maupun yang lain-lainnya. Itu tadi yang program-program di mana yang di-provide oleh kita, Kaplan Edupac. Jadi seperti GMAT ya, untuk maksimum score-nya itu kan 800, kemudian GRE juga 170 per kuantitatif, TOEFL IBT 120, IELTS skor 9 maksimal, dan SAT tentunya kalian mungkin sudah banyak yang tahu juga ya. Jadi kalau maksimum skor SAT itu adalah 1.600 dan masa berlakunya 5 tahun, di mana kuantitatif untuk yang skornya adalah 800 maksimum, kemudian verbal reading writing itu adalah 800 skor maksimalnya. Oke, next Kak. Nah, ini adalah beberapa placement test result. Jadi pada saat kalian kursus di Kaplan Edupac, nah kita juga akan berikan mengenai test result-nya. Jadi dari awal kemudian perkembangan yang sudah dicapai berapa sampai di akhir menjelang international test. Nah, kita juga bisa tahu nih kira-kira kita sudah cukup atau mana yang ada yang kurang misalnya. Nah, di sini tercantum ada TOEFL untuk placement test result-nya. Jadi nanti bisa terlihat reading, listening, speaking, writing-nya berapa. Kemudian di sampingnya adalah ini untuk placement test result dari IELTS. Nah, yang di sebelah kanan adalah placement test result. Jadi kalian mengikuti program preparation di sini, nanti akan ada 3 kali progress test. Nah, di mana bisa terlihat berapa sih skor kuantitatif verbalnya, kuantitatif berapa sih skor untuk verbalnya. Jadi kita bisa tahu kira-kira harus di-upgrade di mana ini. Seperti itu. Oke, ini adalah placement test results mengenai program TOEFL IELTS SAT. Next, Kak Jali. Ya, ini masih placement test result untuk program GMAT dan GRE. Oke, nah ini adalah testimoni dari student kita. Jadi untuk yang SAT ini ada Matthew, nah dia di awal sudah skor 1.200 sekian, nah begitu ikut preparation dia sudah tercapai 1.540. Seperti itu. Jadi di sini juga student kita juga mempersiapkan untuk lebih maksimal. Oke, next Kak Jali. Ya, nah ini untuk yang student experience dari perusahaan-perusahaan, nah di mana mereka juga mempersiapkan persiapan mengenai IELTS maupun GRE. Oke, next. Ya, ini beberapa dari student kita yang sudah berangkat ke US, dan ini adalah klien-klien kita dari company-company, ada Pegadaian, Aminah, BRI, Jasa Marga, dan lain-lainnya. Oke, nah untuk Edupac, saya rasa mungkin cukup, dan ini saya akan jelaskan Edu Expert, di mana Edu Expert ini adalah divisi yang membantu kalian kalau misalnya membutuhkan mengenai konsultasi studi ke luar negeri. Jadi mengenai dari awal dari free konsultasinya sendiri, kemudian bagaimana sih untuk pendaftarnya online registration-nya, kemudian pengurusan mengenai visa, flight ticket, accommodation, kemudian nanti sebelum berangkat biasanya kita akan berikan briefing pre-departure. Nah, kemudian pengurusan mengenai admission dokumen sampai seandainya mungkin ada keluarga yang akan ikut ke sana, nanti kita bisa bantu. Nah, itu nanti bisa dibantu oleh Kak Richard. Nanti di akhir sesi ini akan ada nomor kontak atau kontak numbernya. Kalian misalnya membutuhkan informasi bisa langsung kontak ke Kak Richard. Oke, next Kak Jali. Nah, ya ini seperti yang di awal saya sampaikan bahwa kita akan memberikan super promo test prep untuk bagi peserta yang ikut di Introduction SAT Verbal. Nah, ini kita berikan diskon biaya kursus 1 juta ya, sebesar 1 juta. Itu berlaku untuk TOEFL, IELTS, GMAT, GRE maupun SAT. Nah, kalian bisa scan ya untuk yang di barcode kanan. Mungkin kita beri waktu sejenak ya Kak Jali.
Baik Pak Ian, boleh.
Ya.
Ayo teman-teman, kita kasih waktu sekitar berapa ya? Semenit mungkin.
Ya, silakan. Mungkin kelihatan ya untuk scan barcode-nya ya.
Iya, kelihatan ada di pojok kanan bawah.
Oke.
Kita tunggu sampai 15.21 ya teman-teman ya.
Oke. Oke, cukup.
Cukup ya?
Ya.
Oke, baik. Terima
Next
kasih teman-teman.
slide-nya, Pak.
Kita next.
Ya. Ini dapatkan voucher ya Kak. Oke, kita berikan untuk quiz. Jadi bagi mereka yang nanti menjawab pertanyaan dari saya, kalian berhak mendapatkan voucher diskon sebesar 1 juta ya untuk persiapan TOEFL, IELTS maupun SAT, GMAT dan GRE juga. Oke, mungkin kita bisa mulai Kak Jali ya.
Sudah bisa mulai.
Oke.
Mungkin bisa diklik apa namanya? Angkat tangan.
Ya, nanti
raise your hand, jadi
kalian
nanti kita
misalnya
yang
akan menjawab, silakan nanti diklik atau mungkin nanti bisa unmute, nanti biar dicatat oleh Kak Domi ataupun Kak Erni untuk menjawab pertanyaan. Oke, kita mulai ya. Pertanyaan pertama, ada bisa nggak yang menyebutkan bahwa apa sih, kenapa sih Kaplan disebut sebagai the world leader in test preparation? Ada yang bisa menjawab nggak?
Ya teman-teman, kenapa
Silakan,
Kaplan
ayo.
jadi the world leader preparation?
Ya.
Kenapa? Gampang banget loh itu pertanyaannya.
Sebutkan minimal 2 nih dari 3 yang ada yang tadi saya sampaikan. Ayo, siapa yang bisa? Siapa namanya Kak? Sandi Utami ya Kak Gajali ya?
Kak Sandi Roland David.
Hah? Sorry.
Kak Roland David, ayo Kak Roland David.
Ya,
mungkin
baik.
bisa di unmute.
Ya, makasih atas kesempatannya Pak.
Ya, oke. Silakan Kak David dijawab, sebutkan kenapa Kaplan itu disebut sebagai the world leader in test preparation.
Baik, sepengetahuan saya mungkin karena atas bahan-bahan yang sangat similar terhadap tesnya dan juga bahan-bahan yang terupdate dan pelatihannya pun cukup baik.
Oke, terima kasih David. Gimana Pak Ian?
Kurang tepat ya. Jadi
kurang
silakan
tepat.
kita berikan siapa yang bisa tadi.
Ayo siapa lagi? Teman-teman bisa angkat tangan?
Ya, siapa?
Oke. Cuma Mas Roland aja nih yang angkat tangan.
Masih kurang tepat.
Mas Roland masih
ada
kurang
lagi?
Tepat. Oke.
Sandi Utami itu, Sandi Utami Kak.
Sandi Utami, nah iya benar Sandi Utami.
Silakan,
Ayo
Kak
silakan.
Sandi. Ayo dapat 1 juta nih.
Baik, terima kasih atas kesempatannya.
Ya, oke.
Saya di sini mau izin memperkenalkan diri terlebih dahulu. Perkenalkan, nama saya Komang Sandi Utami. Saya berasal dari Desa Galungan, Kecamatan Sawan, Kabupaten Buleleng, Provinsi Bali.
Oke, baik.
Oke,
Dari
Bali.
Oke.
Saya siswi dari SMK Negeri Bali Mandara.
Ya.
Nah, di sini saya mau izin menjawab kenapa Kaplan itu terjadi, yaitu adanya jadi satu-satunya kursus persiapan protokol GANH. Sekian dan terima kasih. Mohon maaf jika ada kesalahan.
Oke.
Terima kasih, Sadi.
Masih kurang tepat nih. Ayo, tadi
ya,
ada
masih
yang
kurang Sandi.
sempat memperhatikan nggak? Oke, ada lagi yang mungkin bisa menjawab dengan tepat? Dua jawaban dari 3. Ada lagi? Oke, nggak ada ya?
Oke, tidak ada ya.
Ada itu, ada Kak Angel.
Oh, Kak Angel, ayo silakan Kak Angel di.
Ya, silakan Kak Angel. Mudah-mudahan bisa tepat ini sekarang.
Terima kasih atas kesempatan yang telah diberikan. Jadi jawaban saya adalah karena Kaplan Edupac telah membantu lebih dari 3 juta orang Indonesia.
Oke, terus?
Apalagi Kak?
Sudah itu saja. Terima kasih.
Oke.
Bagaimana Pak Ian?
Oke, masih kurang tepat.
Masih kurang tepat.
Ya. Oke, kita lanjut pertanyaan kedua ya untuk mempersingkat waktu. Oke, nah ini baru nih pertanyaan kedua bahwa kenapa kita perlu belajar di Kaplan? Sebutkan 2 dari 3 yang tadi saya sampaikan. Ayo, siapa yang bisa menjawab?
Ya, Kak Sandi mau jawab lagi.
Ya, siapa?
Kak Sandi apakah mau jawab lagi atau ada lain?
Ada yang lain?
Kak Isna, Kak Kamila, Kak Ina, Kak Elia.
Ada yang ingat nggak?
Oh, Kak Roland David. Ayo Kak David, silakan bisa jawab lagi kalau mau.
Baik. Mungkin saya hanya ingat satu, tapi salah satunya mungkin yaitu karena tadi bahan-bahannya yang terupdate dan sedikit mirip dengan soal aslinya.
Oke, ada lagi nggak? Selain materi apa ini?
Mungkin karena
ayo. Sudah 1 jawaban sudah betul. Ada nggak? Masih ingat? Kalau mengenai gurunya bagaimana?
oh iya, gurunya mungkin karena gurunya juga merupakan ada yang native speaker dan beberapa ada dan memiliki sertifikasi seperti itu.
Oke, baik. Oke, jadi coba saya refresh ya. Kenapa di Kaplan? Yaitu satu-satunya sekolah persiapan ujian mempunyai website sendiri dengan tes yang mirip dengan aslinya. Karena kita juga perlu materi-materi online untuk latihan. Kemudian materi kita juga original, jadi kita sudah provide materi sendiri. Kemudian kita punya guru berkualifikasi tinggi. Oke, selamat Mas Ronald Ronald ya ini tadi ya?
Mas Roland. Roland David.
Roland David. Oke, nanti bisa di chat ke kami untuk nomor handphone yang bisa kami hubungin ya Kak.
Baik Pak.
Oke.
Pak Ian, maaf nih ada pertanyaan, ada ini lagi dari Diva Pratama dari chatbox. Mungkin jawabannya adalah memiliki cabang di berbagai negara sehingga Kaplan menjadi yang terbaik. Bagaimana Pak Ian?
Ya, bisa dijawab.
Apakah benar jawabannya Pak Ian? Jawabannya Diva adalah memiliki cabang di berbagai negara sehingga Kaplan menjadi yang terbaik.
Ya, ini untuk yang mana ini? Untuk yang
dia masuk ke chatbox jawabannya.
Word reader atau gimana? Jawab yang mana ini?
Oh, yang ke nomor 2 tadi.
Untuk yang kenapa di Kaplan?
Iya, betul.
Kurang tepat. Kalau untuk itu adalah di sebagai satu-satunya penyedia tes prep yang terbesar di dunia.
Oke, kurang tepat ya,
Siap.
Kak Diva.
Ya, oke, thank you. Jadi mungkin mengingat waktu yang sudah lebih, jadi mungkin kita cukup sampai di sini ya, Kak Jali, untuk penjelasan mengenai Kaplan. Kemudian nanti di akhir acara kita nanti bisa share lagi mengenai klaim untuk voucher maupun nanti akan nomor yang bisa menghubungi atau kalau ada yang ingin konsultasi mengenai studi luar negeri dengan Kak Richard atau saya mengenai preparation nanti kita tampilkan di akhir. Oke, saya kembalikan lagi untuk Kak Richard. Terima kasih. Sorry Kak Jali.
Ini ya teman-teman ya, yang pertama adalah kontak dari Pak Ian Damora selaku Relationship Manager, serta Kak Richard selaku International Education Counselor. Bisa di-save, jadi kalau kalian yang pengen tahu tentang beasiswa ke luar negeri, gimana gitu dan lain-lain, yang gimana sih cara berangkat, itu bisa langsung ke Kak Richard. Silakan di-save dulu nomornya kalau memang ada yang dibutuhkan. Baik, terima kasih teman-teman. Udah lama nunggu ya. Sekarang waktunya ke Mr. Eric. So, Mr. Eric, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Eric. You can start now. Okay. Have a good day, teman-teman, everyone. And now I will give a chance to Mr. Eric.
All right. Thank you.
Mr.
I need to have the share screen available. Yeah, whatever is currently on. There we go. All right. That opens the door for me to share here. There we go. Hopefully that's clear for everybody. All right. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I'm going to be using my native language, English, to do a very quick overview of the SAT verbal side, not the math side, because of limited time. I assume that if you're considering going to school overseas, that you should be able to follow my language for the most part. Yeah, so let's begin then. You might be wondering, what is this SAT that I see required by a number of universities, most universities actually? And it used to be called the Scholastic Aptitude Test, but the organization, the College Board, changed that, and so now it's just called SAT. And SAT is an academic test. It is not a language test. There is a verbal section to it, though. And this is the test then that you would need to take, and I recommend that if you're considering applying to a number of universities overseas, that you take the SAT and you have the score in your portfolio, because there are going to be universities that will require it. Some don't right now, but most do. All right, so what is this thing, SAT then? So let's first talk about the structure. It takes 3 hours to complete. There is no longer an essay required at the moment. That has been postponed. So there is only a verbal and a math section. All questions are multiple choice, unlike if you have taken IELTS in the past, where there are fill-in blank spaces and other types of questions. For SAT, it's all multiple choice. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the reading test and the writing and language test. The math test will probably introduce in a future presentation sometime. So let's talk about those 3 parts in a little bit more detail here. The reading section takes 65 minutes and you answer a total of 52 questions. And I'll talk more about the reading passages a little bit later in the presentation. The writing and language section lasts 35 minutes and you answer 44 questions there. And just so you know how this compares to math, math takes 80 minutes to complete, where you answer 58 questions. So as you can see, an hour and 40 minutes for the verbal side of the test, and an hour and 20 minutes for the math side. Let's talk about scoring. Both the verbal section and the math section are scored from 200 to 800. And they are combined then, and universities will look at your combined score for both parts of the test, which ranges from 400 to 1600. There is another way that your score is looked at, and that's in percentile. So in addition to your calculated score, people who read your application at universities are also going to be looking at where you place in comparison to other students. So when you see the percentile score, if you take the test, for that particular test, that is your rank, where you fit. So if you're at the 50th percentile, half the students who took that test scored better than you, and half scored worse. You're right in the middle. Let me just make a quick adjustment here. There we go. The average score then, the range is 400 to 1600. The average is 1067. And that's taken from the average for verbal, which is 536, and the average for math, which is 531. So if you want to know what score then you need to achieve for both the verbal and the math side to reach the 50th percentile, these are the scores that you need to make. So let's just complete this discussion about percentile. You might be wondering, what score do I need to make or score at in order to reach a certain percentile? So here are some figures that will help you make a comparison. If you score 1100, you can see that you're just slightly above the average score at the 58th percentile. This is certainly a good score, but you're right in the middle. 1200 puts you at the 74th percentile. 1200 is considered by most universities as the point where they really start looking closely at your SAT score and start considering it as being a competitive and a nice score for their university. At 1300, you would place at the 87th percentile. And then at 1400, only 6% of the people who take the test would score higher than you between 1400 and 1600. 1400 is, you're doing fantastic. 94th percentile there. All right. When and where can I take it? It's always offered on Saturdays, always Saturdays. You can take it on Sunday if you request an exception for a religious reason or other reason. They do offer it in those cases on Sunday. It's offered in August, and then the peak season, October, November, December, when applications are due at universities, and then there's a break. It's offered again in March, then in May and in June. Usually it is offered one time during those months. So you have to be careful about your registration. You can take the test multiple times. And if you want to find out where the test center closest to you is, you should look at the collegeboard.org website. You should be looking at that anyway. And to make sure that you get a place in the one test that is offered in your particular month, you must register 1 month in advance. If you don't register 1 month in advance, there is a late fee that's applied. And the reason that this is important is because if you wait less than 1 month to register for a test, for example, in March, let's say you want to take the test this month, and it's already less than 30 days, you may not find a place in the test or at a test center. So that's even worse than having to pay the late fee. Okay. Let's talk about the two parts then of the verbal section. So I'm going to begin with the reading test. It focuses on comprehension, of course, reading comprehension, and reasoning skills. This is the use of logic to solve certain types of problems. As I mentioned, 65 minutes. There are 4 single and 1 paired passages, so 5 passages total. As I mentioned earlier, 52 multiple choice questions, and each of the passages is approximately 500 to 750 words, which is about a little bit more than 1 page in the test book. The topics that are covered include US and world literature. You will only see 1 passage about this topic. This literature can come from recent, something that's been written recently, all the way back to 50 or 100 years ago. Very often, SAT will present literature passages which are old, and the English is a little bit uncommon. So that's something to take into consideration. All right, the other, hold on, I lost my cursor here. Let me see if I can get it back. Hold on. There we go. Okay, we're back. The other topic is history or social studies, 2 passages, or 1 passage and 1 paired passage. I'm going to be demonstrating that to you a little bit later. If you don't know what the paired passage is, I'll show you in a few minutes. And the last topic is science, like history and social studies, 2 passages or 1 passage and 1 paired passage with 10 or 11 questions. So here's an example of how a passage begins. That tells you what questions are going to follow the passage. It gives you what's called a heading, or a blurb is another way, another word we have for that. And it says this passage describes some research applications of a bioluminescent jellyfish protein. And then it goes on to explain what that is. Electron excitation is the process by which an electron, and it goes so on and so forth. So obviously, this is a science passage. And if you're curious about the level of difficulty of English, as you can see, this is an example of something that you would read in an undergraduate science textbook, or possibly could even be in 11th or 12th grade high school. Main idea questions appear first, followed by detail questions. Let's talk about main idea questions in just a moment. We'll begin with the easiest type of question to answer. And one thing that you must understand is how to find detail. So here's an example of a detail question. The passage indicates which of the following about the sun's luminosity in the solar cycle. So each of the 4 answer choices is given then, and the correct answer is something that you saw directly in the passage. And that's what you have to go back and find and confirm. The other 3 answers misrepresent something that's in the passage, or they're not even in the passage. It's a statement that is related to the topic, but the support for the answer choice is not really there. All right, you must understand. Let's come back to main idea, purpose, or summary questions. Here's an example. Which one of the following best describes the main idea of the passage? And then you're given 4 choices. So something that you have to keep in mind as you're reading then for SAT is, what is the purpose and what is the main idea of the passage? That's always something that you should be considering as you go through the reading. You must understand how to make inferences. So this is where we use logic. Earlier, I mentioned that there are reasoning questions, which means we use logic, and inferring something is one of those types of questions. Here's an example of an inference question. Based on information in the passage, it can most reasonably be inferred that faculas, by the way, it should be faculi, is the plural, and then you have 4 answer choices, and these answer choices are logical extensions of what we read in the passage. We won't find them directly stated. So you have to be able to use logic to make those connections to get to these answer choices. You must understand the rhetorical function of words and sentences. What does rhetorical function mean? It means the why somebody writes something, not what somebody writes. So let's take a look at an example of that. Number 9, the main purpose of the questions in the second to last paragraph, line 76 to 84, is to do what? Notice the verbs here in the answer choices: emphasize, explain, question, express doubts. All of these answer the question, why did the writer write something? And this is what this fancy name, rhetorical function, this is what it means. Knowing why, not just what. You must understand how to see relationships between 2 passages on the same topic. This is what paired passages are. They're unique to the SAT, and they look like this. So at the top of the page, you would see the heading. Passage 1 is adapted from an 1823 speech by President James Monroe. And then later in the heading, it says, Passage 2 is adapted from a 1905 speech by President Theodore Roosevelt. Passage 1 begins below the heading, and then in the next column, of course, passage 1 continues in the left column, and then passage 2, you see, starts in the right column. Now, a typical question, these 2 passages are related to each other. So a typical question would be like this: on which of the following points do the writers of the passages, plural, express agreement? In other words, what answer choice below do we see that both writers refer to and agree together on? So we have to see the relationship when we look at a paired passage problem. There's one of these in the reading section. Right, quickly, you must understand the author's purpose for writing the passage. Remember, that's one of the things that we always keep in mind. Because we're going to see a question that looks something like this. The primary purpose of the passage is to do what? Notice the verbs again: argue something, which is persuade, compare, explain, refute. So these, again, were for purpose, just like for rhetorical function, we're explaining the why. What is the purpose of the passage? All right, 2 more things that we need to know about the reading part of the test. The passage's structure, we have to understand that, and if you're not sure about that, this is what you will learn in a class or through self-study, reading a book. And number 8, what types of questions you will see and what information they are asking you to find. And this afternoon, we have just started to look at that, but I haven't covered all of the question types. So you'll need to continue to look at what you expect to see in the reading test. All right. Quickly, tips and strategies. Number 1, read with the awareness that you will answer questions about the purpose and theme of the passage. That just repeats what I've already mentioned. Number 2, circle and underline words and make notes in the margin to help you remember the main ideas of the paragraphs. All right, so I'm assuming that you're going to take the paper test at a test center here in Indonesia. I'm not sure. I don't think that the online test is available here yet. So I'm assuming that you will take the paper test. You can write on the test, no problem. Number 3, Look for keywords or in questions that will quickly guide you back to where you need to look for information. So we look at the questions and we look for keywords that we can match back to the passage. And that's a technique that will help us to find what we need to look for much more quickly. All right, number 4, if possible, predict the answers, thus avoiding tricky distractors. So some questions, you can imagine the answer before you look at the answer choices. If we can do this, that's a good idea. Some questions, we cannot imagine what the answer would be before we look at the answer choices. And of course, in that case, we go directly to the answers. Read quicker than normal. You don't need to understand everything while still understanding main ideas. Yeah, just read quickly and get the general idea of what's talked about in each paragraph. Don't worry about the detail. You can come back and look for that later. Keep track of time. You should spend about 13 minutes on each passage. And if there are unanswered questions just before time expires, quickly fill in your BLF. What is that? Your best letter forever. All right, so if you have to guess to finish the section, there's no penalty for guessing. You should just choose the same letter every time. C, 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 if there are 4 questions. And that's because it will increase the probability that you will guess correctly for at least one of the questions. All right, let's switch now from the reading test and let's talk about the writing and language test. This focuses on your ability to revise and edit text. So let me just review what we've talked about a little bit before. It takes 35 minutes. There are 44 multiple choice questions. There are 4 single passages with 11 questions. And each of the passages has about 400 to 450 words. So not quite as long as the reading test. Topics are careers, humanities, history and social studies, like the reading test, and science, like the reading test. Passage types are, you can see an argument, somebody trying to persuade you about something. You can see a descriptive passage, which is informative or explanatory. And you could see a narrative, which is a story, but it's going to be nonfiction. It's not going to be Alice in Wonderland. It's going to be a passage from a story about a real person or a real event. You might be asked to revise or edit text based on the data in a table or a graph. So make sure your graph interpretation skills are good and you know how to do that in English. There are 2 skills basically that are being tested here. One, how well you can organize and develop ideas by moving sentences and paragraphs. Let's take a look at an example of a problem that would ask you to do that. So to make this paragraph most logical, sentence 2, which will be marked in the paragraph, should be placed A, where it is now, B, before sentence 1, C, after sentence 3, or D, after sentence 4. All of the sentences in the paragraph are numbered. And based on what you see in the sentence, you have to fit it where it connects to the ideas in the other sentences in the best way. The second skill is how well you can correct mistakes in sentence structure, usage, and punctuation. For example, take a look at this sentence. Although most of the products we buy today are made abroad in places well known to Americans, such as Mexico and China, a quick check of many clothing labels will reveal the name of a country that might, and then so on and so forth. So when we look at this, although comma most is underlined, and then we look over at the answer choices and we see what SAT is suggesting as a possible change, B, although most with no comma, C, although most with a semicolon, and D, most. Well, we're using the word although, and it's at the beginning of a sentence and a paragraph, and nothing comes before it. So the comparison that we're making then by using the word although is the contrast, I should say, occurs in information later. So in that case, we don't need the comma because the comma is in the middle of the sentence after China. That's where the two parts of the sentences occur that we're comparing. So the answer here would be B, bravo. That's the change that we would need to make. All right. Tips and strategies. Then for the writing and language part of the test, number one, don't read the entire passage before answering questions. Right. So instead, what you want to do, read up to and slightly beyond the underlined part of a sentence, and then answer the question, and then continue until you come to the next underlined part of a sentence. Look at the answer choices to help you understand what type of error you need to correct. Sometimes when we look at an underlined part of a sentence, we think, I don't know if there's a mistake here or not. Well, remember that the correct answer is always in front of you somewhere. So when we look at the answer choices, we can see ideas about what we might change, and that will help us to remember whatever punctuation or grammar, whatever we need to change. Number four, don't choose answers that correct the error in the sentence, but introduce new errors. So you have to make sure if you replace the underlined part of the sentence, you replace it with something that doesn't add something new, a new mistake. All right, if two answers are similar and both correct the error, choose the answer that is more concise. SAT loves conciseness. So if you've got two competing answers, choose the one that's shorter. Correct answers do not change the meaning of the original sentence. Always the original meaning should stay there. Okay. Am I finished here? Are we ready for questions? Let me see. No, one more. Keep track of time. You have about 8 to 9 minutes to complete each passage. All right. Don't want to make too many guesses at the very end of the section. Okay. Wow, that was quick, and that was a lot of information. If you'd like to use the chat room, if you have any questions, we've got a few minutes here, not too many, about 3, 4, 5 minutes. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any. And I'll just monitor the chat room for a few moments.
Halo, buat teman-teman yang ingin bertanya, silakan bisa menanyakan ke Mr. Eric, bisa open mic, atau mungkin mau drop chat di chat, nanti bisa tanya ke Mr. Eric, beliau akan bisa bantu kira-kira tips and trik untuk SAT seperti apa, mungkin untuk tesnya atau mungkin intro dilanjut.
Mas Domi,
chat aja, atau mungkin
suaranya terlalu kecil, Mas, maaf.
Gimana, sorry?
Oke, saya cover ya, Mas.
Oke.
Baik, teman-teman, itu tadi dari informasi dari Mr. Eric. Kira-kira adakah yang ingin kalian tanyakan? Kalau tidak pede dengan bahasa Inggris bisa melalui chat box, atau kalau kalian memang benar-benar mau langsung nanya, silakan open mic-nya. Okay.
Everybody,
so do you want to say something? Or do you want to ask to the audience?
Yeah, everybody is probably thinking first, oh, do I have to write something in English? And then after your invitation, they're probably thinking, oh, I don't want to speak in English. Yeah, never mind that. Okay. Your English doesn't have to be perfect, of course. All right, I don't see anything coming up in the chat room, and we're getting close to 4 o'clock. So let me just leave you with this again. If you weren't able to take a QR scan of the codes, if you need more information about the test or what you should do to prepare for it, or anything related to your plans about studying overseas, feel free to contact one of our student advisors who can assist you with this. And let me just say that it's been a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Good luck in your pursuit of higher education, and good luck on the SAT test if you take it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eric. Okay, everyone, before we close it, so could you please open your video? We need to see your face, and we just buy from here. Okay, everyone, do you wanna open it your camera if you have it? Okay, Mr. Eric, I think we can finish it. Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. So let us screenshot. Okay, bye everyone. Say it, bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.